And so this leads up to kind of a fun project that I like talking about, the Counterfeit Crochet Project, Critique of a Political Economy. This is a counterfeit Chanel handbag that I made to kick off a project in which I was essentially inviting crochet crafters from all over the world to join me in bootlegging high-end items. So, again, with a kind of DIY aesthetic, like making do, if you can't have the high-end designer good, what are some of the ways in which you can do it yourself? And there's a huge crafting community out there, and a lot of times they like to share patterns about nice scarves or pot holders or things like that. And I really wanted to kind of prod them into diverting their labor into something that was a little bit more critical. So it's a fun project. I started a website that solicited makers, and I also provided downloadable PDF instruction sheets on how to counterfeit. And the response was amazing. I was getting in images from folks who were choosing designer objects that they wished that they owned, and then using their own skills to hand make them. So this is Carrie in Ohio with her Dior bucket bag. And I black out the eyes because I'm trying to keep their identities safe. This is Diana's Dior from Oregon. This is Nicole's Dolce & Gabbana in Mississippi. So the funny thing for me about this project too is that essentially this is another level of outsourcing also. I don't make the bags are made by individuals. And so as kind of a collaboration, I was thinking about the ways in which industry also creates these designer goods. And so to kind of take advantage of individual skill sets in terms of crochet, and also individual initiative at the production end was really interesting for me. This is Katie's Louis Vuitton Murakami bag, and the folks also had a lot of fun taking photographs of themselves modeling the bag. So this is Katie actually visiting a Louis Vuitton store. And the mistranslations are also really interesting. This is a counterfeit Fendi bag by Wendy. Looks really, kind of lumpy. And another kind of interesting mistranslation. This is a counterfeit Coach bag in progress by Carrie in Ohio. And eventually I collected enough of the objects to exhibit. And this particular installation or configuration of them was shown in Beijing, which I thought was really interesting because it's as the capital of the counterfeiting world, these kind of approximated designer objects were on display, and I was getting some really interesting feedback about it as well. And a lot of times folks would ask me like, well, we do so much, we can do a better job at this over here. And so it was a really interesting dialogue about craft and the handmade and what is desirable. And this eventually led to counterfeiting workshops that were sponsored. I'm leading a counterfeiting workshop at Garanti Gallery in Istanbul in 2007. And also as just a way to, get a group of people together to even begin a dialogue, to sit in a room together, to hand make something. And to start thinking about what that process means in this day in which we're so far removed from the actual production of the objects that we interact with. It was really interesting. I mean, most people wound up not making actual bags in the end. You can't get very far in these counterfeiting workshops, but it did start to kind of open up a dialogue about actually having a hand in your world. This is a version of the Counterfeit Crochet Project at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts last year. And so this leads me now to this idea of the kind of like bottom-up making, which seems to be happening today. This is an image from a book, Handmade Nation, The Rise of DIY Art, Craft, and Design, that was just recently published by Princeton Architectural Press. There's also a documentary movie that goes along with it, and it documents what seems to be this kind of new resurgence in an interest in handmade production. And I mean, you could make the argument that because of our general alienation from actual, knowing techniques or actual fabrication processes for our objects, now there's almost like a romantic interest in it, like somehow, folks want to get back to that, a closer relationship with their things. And along with this craft movement now, it's grown. There's the Renegade Craft Fair is sort of one of the larger groupings of people who are now crafting things for sale, and the things can range from clothing items to stationery sets to toys, and you can also kind of question, like, is this a political reaction, or can you see it as such, or is it just merely folks creating new products to sell in different ways? And so there's the proliferation of production is interesting because people are still buying and consuming and producing, but maybe there's something really interesting in that there's more of a direct relationship with the actual means of production. And to kind of further it along, the idea of the Maker Fair, which has now been going on for several years in San Mateo, expands the idea of making and creating and crafting. And as the world's largest DIY festival, as they kind of dub themselves, it brings together everything from robotics workshops to slow food movement folks to sewers and crafters. And it's just an interesting way to start reframing this issue of crafting, or craft as a verb as opposed to an object now, and to actually go through the motions of the knowledge of skills in your own hands. So I think I'm really curious to see where this is going. It's really interesting to present today in light of the panelists who are really, seem to have a real grounding in industry, because I think what is interesting for me is the kind of bottom up of what's happening with production in that type of relationship, and I'm curious to see how they meet, maybe in the middle. Thank you.